And start the recording here. And then before we get started as well, I do want to do a land acknowledgement. For those of us that are part of the University of Washington, we're pretty familiar with this. It's something the ASUW does before all of their events. So the ASUW acknowledges the stewards of the Coast Salish lands, the lands on which we currently sit, and the UW occupies. We acknowledge the original and current caretakers, Duwamish, Squamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot tribes and nations. All right, and then I would like to introduce to you our wonderful moderator, Jessie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie. And I use she and her pronouns. I'm not sure if Christine already mentioned that, but we do want to acknowledge the lands that we are on. We want to acknowledge the Coast of Salish lands on which we currently sit and the UW occupies. We acknowledge the original and current caretakers, who are the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations and peoples. Thank you. We also do want to thank all the service providers, and including our doctors, our nurses, the hospital workers, our home care workers, our restaurant workers, and people who work in essential service fields. We know that this is a very difficult time and we appreciate your service. For today's webinar, we have three amazing panelists. Before we introduce them, I would like to talk a little bit about the topic we'll be discussing today. There are some trigger warnings: autism, as well as appropriation, cultural appropriation. So I'd like to open by welcoming our panelists today. Our first panelist, their name, their pronouns, and a brief bio. I'll start with Katie Roberts. Katie?
Hi everyone, hello, hello, hello. This is Katie Roberts. I'm Katie Roberts, greetings to all. My pronouns are she and her. And I use American Sign Language. So I work at Seattle Central College, my primary place of employment. I've been staff there for many years. I am a lecturer, a professor, and instructor there of American Sign Language, deaf culture, etc. And I'm very immersed in the studies of American Sign Language and deaf culture in the larger communities. Thinking about disability rights and how to further the movement and the rights of deaf people throughout the community. So welcome
Yes.
to everyone. Hello, Jessie, it's nice to see you. Hello. I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Jessie here. Now our next panelist is Echo Greenlee.
Hi, everyone. I'm Echo. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the founder of a company called Deaf Friendly. We help various businesses to create a deaf-friendly customer experiences nationwide. So I'm very pleased to be here today, and I'll say goodbye for now.
Thank you so much, Echo. Our next panelist is Raja Kumashara.
Hello, everybody. I am Raja Kushalanagar. And I don't care how you say my name. I only care how you spell it, because my first language is English and sign. So just go ahead and fingerspell it. My pronouns are he and him. And I am an instructor of the IT program at Gallaudet University, with several deaf and hard of hearing students within the major itself. Gallaudet is the only university for deaf and hard of hearing students in the world, and it's a standalone university in Washington, D.C. I am a member of 2 various committees on IT. Our sign name is Gallaudet. We'll talk about that later. And my research has been done on access technology for deaf and hard of hearing folks, and I will be discussing how to include deaf and hard of hearing individuals in order to make sure the technology meets our unique needs. And I don't want to go off on various technological issues because it could be a scary story, but we can discuss some of that stuff later.
Thank you, Raja. Very cool. Thank you so much for joining us today. There's going to be a lot of information and a lot of sharing from the deaf perspective about what technology, not only the benefits to the community, but as well as the drawbacks. And ideas about how we can support deaf people through technology. So I'm very excited about all the presentations today. Each presentation will be 15 minutes. And so we will begin with Katie. Katie Roberts will be first, and she's going to be talking about drawbacks of technology to the deaf community.
I can't unmute myself. I can't see Katie. Sorry, 1 second, please, folks. Hold on. I'm sorry. Start video. I can't see Katie. I can't see Katie. I can't see Katie. I can't see Katie.
We've had a little bit of technological issues that have arisen. If you could hold on a moment.
There's Katie. There she is.
In just one moment.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Yes. Yes. Can you see me? Very good. All right. This is Katie speaking. All right. Let me get back to my presentation here, my PowerPoint. All right. Apologize for that interruption. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, here we go. Here we go. All right then. So, in the last couple, 2 or 3 years, there's been a lot of information in the news about, particularly from the state of Washington, about new developments in, communication for the deaf. With the signing gloves, there, in particular, there are a couple of individuals who have been traveling around and looking at what is out there, and they're noticing that things are not right. All right? And this is what I really want to bring to light here, is that Since the 1980s, this has been progressing and we're still not on the right track. Still talking about these gloves, these signing gloves, and specifically in the last 2 or 3 years. If you can see on the slides, sorry, I missed the names of the 2 presenters here. They won an award here at the University of Washington, Navid and I believe Thomas. They won an award here at the University of Washington for the development of these quote unquote signing gloves. And this is the epitome of Don Quixote, all right? It's like we can do something and we're gonna try to do this and this is why we think we're doing this. And again, I really want you to remember that the research and the intention does not always equate to the impact. It's often very discordant. There are many students out there, many engineers who have been working on things for a very long time. The list is endless, right? And we've seen this signing glove idea come up periodically over the years. It's happened many times. And I'm going to give you a little bit more information about that right now. As a person who signs, when you take that American Sign Language and translate it into English, it's just what it looks like. It doesn't work. So you're putting these gloves, the information goes through these gloves into a computer and comes out into what is supposed to be appropriate English, right? And this is what the result may look like. Or rather, for this, these 2 young fellows have won many awards, calling this technology a bridge, a communication bridge between deaf and hearing people. But the problem is that it doesn't acknowledge the naturalness, the linguistic intrinsicness of American Sign Language. All right. As a result, people have revolted. The villagers revolt because it's really important that you have the deaf perspective included in every venture of technology. And they've never included deaf users in their research. They have not yet. This is a major fault. All right, so it is something that it does not make sense. It does not follow the rules of common sense. It does not follow the rules of language. And the other thing is that I, as a signer, theoretically have to adjust my signing to a more English variant of what it is that I want to say. Conversely, how does the English speaker communicate with me? They're not able to. So there is a disjunct there. There is a discord. There is a disconnect. And that it's a one-way communication. It's not a bridge if it doesn't go 2 ways. All right? Here at the University of Washington, we've seen a lot of this, and particularly this last example, Sign Aloud. There is a letter that has been written from the department and sent out admonishing this, the progress of this technology, because it doesn't include deaf people. So the Sign Aloud gloves do not really exhibit an understanding and a comprehension of American Sign Language. They just don't. They do not have the intrinsic ability to interpret grammar, syntax, etc., and they don't have that two-way communication. The benefit is only for the hearing person. And how can you rectify that? How can you reconcile that? Thirdly, I would like to say that there are many assumptions that sign language, American Sign Language, is just a sign-to-word system. It is not. There are so many different elements. It's not just the signs that you produce, it's the facial expression, it's the body language, it's the space that you use that all come into play with American Sign Language. Those things cannot be represented via these gloves. So it's a gimmick. It's becoming a gimmick. It's not a truly useful communication tool. It's just becoming a gimmick. And this is unfortunate. All right. And with that, I would just like to say that as you deaf people see this project and they realize that something is wrong, they realize that something is not right, and they realize that they have not been included in the process. And that is where the disconnect comes from. It's like, this is something that somebody's invented and it's not working, but we have not been included in as consultants in giving our feedback and our knowledge as to what is working. This is not just in Washington State, this is national, this is all over, this is happening everywhere. The majority of the time, deaf people are not included in the process, and this is a main point that I want to make. Whether, you know, and sometimes deaf people are included, but they're not paid for their expertise and their knowledge. They're not. This is really, truly a fault of our exploratory system here. Things were invented for deaf people, but deaf people have never actually been involved in the development or subsequently the use of these things. And so, hearing people are saying this is a problem that needs to be solved, and deaf people are saying, well, yes, that's a solution, but it does not work for us. So where are the people who are looking to us as the deaf community for the answers and for the input? This is really the main sticking point, and this is an ongoing sticking point. This is an ongoing problem, a systemic problem, trying to think that you can fix hearing loss with cochlear implants or hearing aids. That is not the answer. That is not what we want. Some people may want to have those options, yes, but not everyone. And the hearing people think that we want to hear and that that's our sole goal, and that is not the case. Our sole goal is communication. We want to be able to communicate regardless of the amount of hearing that you have. And it depends, and the tools that you may have will vary depending on the amount of hearing that you have. This is ongoing. Technology has changes, and it's come along over the years, and it's been, quote unquote, for the benefit of deaf people, whether we want it or not. But it's really for the intent to make things easier for hearing people. So really looking at who are the inventors, who are the developers, what is their intent, where is their heart? Are they really looking for the benefits of deaf people? And thinking about the inclusion of deaf people in the development of technology, and that is autism. All right, that is autism. If any person because you have hearing and you feel that you need to bring everybody up to your level, if that is your modus operandi, that is coming from a base of autism. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work. What really works for deaf people is very different. Hearing aids, cochlear implants, none of those things have actually been able to be that bridge. It has not solved the problem. So this is where we need to go from here. Hearing people cannot identify the problem for us. They cannot. And that is what I want to leave you all with. So if what I would say is to anybody who has an idea, please support deaf people first. Whatever any deaf person, back them. Whatever idea or concept they may have, you need to back them first. You may think that you know what deaf people need, but I'm telling you, unless you can see it from a deaf person's eyes, you don't have that first-hand information. So what really does our technology look like? What does that really mean for me to have access as a deaf person? For those people who use cochlear implants and hearing aids, what does that mean? What does that look like for them? What does that look like for me as someone who does not use those sources of technology? And really, it's been a very patrimonial. Deaf people have been trying to take care of deaf people and heal deaf people for so many years, but deaf people have been able and have been coming up with their own technology for years and years and years. We have the solution. We know what the solution is, but no one is including us in the quest for a solution. So what works, what doesn't work, no one's asking us those questions, right? So why do hearing people keep telling us that we have the solutions for you? Because the solutions that you have come up with as hearing people have not been effective. We know another way. We have the ideas, we have the information. You as consumers, consider us all as consumers, as allies. You as hearing people are allies, right? How can we all work together and support deaf people in the endeavor to absolutely create bridges and create technologies in the technology that works best for deaf people? And that is what is the crucial point. The term disability, quote unquote disabled, when people call us disabled, it's very similar to that. It's like, no, we have answers and we have solutions. We are not disabled. All right? That's it. Thank you very much for being here, everyone, today. Thank you so much. And thank you, quote unquote, for listening. Thank you so much. All right, and I'm out.
Thank you so much, Katie. We will have a session for more questions and answers soon in the session. So if you do have questions, please hold on to them so that we can respond to them at a later time. So our next panelist is Echo. Echo will be talking about the benefits of technology to the deaf community.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides now. Hopefully you can see that. Karen, can you see the slides? She can. All right, so we're ready to move on. Katie, your discussion was really phenomenal and so fascinating. I really appreciated your presentation, and it really gave us a lot to think about. I'm going to go ahead and share my topic, which is the positive trends in technology for the deaf and hard of hearing. So I really appreciate being invited to share this information, and I've got a lot of experience in utilizing technologies myself. I really have a love-hate relationship with technologies, I have to admit that. My love for technology is kind of on a case-by-case basis. I'm not someone who supports technology for the sake of technology just because it's being marketed to me. I always ask 4 questions to myself. Who is it that's producing this technology? What's the intention of the technology? Are deaf people included in part of the team? Are they involved as consultants, or do they have lead roles in developing these technologies? And 4th, where is the money going? The profits from these products, do they go back into the community to support the community, or is somebody becoming rich off these technologies? So I think these are all very important questions to ask ourselves, or before you support any specific technology or download something. I always ask myself those 4 questions before I support those. A little bit about who I am. Again, my name is Echo, and you can read the slide to get a little more information. I am a deaf person, obviously. I lost my hearing a little bit later in life. I was 8 years old when I lost my hearing. So spoken language and auditory input was my first language until I was the age of 8. So the hearing way is really part of me. It was my experience until I lost my hearing. Now, as an adult, I am profoundly deaf. I hear nothing without assistive technologies. I learned conversational ASL when I was 19 years of age. My ASL skills are not perfect. My speech is not perfect either. So I'm kind of a mixed bag. I socialize and live with and work with deaf and hearing people on a day-to-day basis, and I really go between both worlds with ease and also with struggles as well. So this is a quote that I think it's really important to acknowledge. So I'm going to ask the interpreter, Karen, if she wouldn't mind reading the quote to the audience. The biggest challenge as a deaf person in the hearing world is not the inability to hear, but the negative attitude of others and their ideas about deaf people and what cause deaf challenged experiences. So to be a deaf person in a world where most people are able to hear is very challenging. It can be tough because the world isn't designed for us. Deaf people are always needing to find various solutions and are continuously breaking down barriers on a daily basis throughout our lives. So there's a lot of problem solving that has to take place. And as Katie mentioned, we need to look at where those solutions are coming from, and are deaf people involved in the making of the solutions. As a deaf person, you can find the hearing world isolating and frustrating. But the barrier is not that we are not able to hear, but that others have limitations put on us or misunderstandings about what we can do. And that is a continuous struggle, which can lead to a lot of technological flops and failures. People aren't asking us what we need. So the next slide. This is an awesome piece of technology, in my opinion. We experience everyday life's barriers. And I started to realize that, I wanted more businesses to be deaf friendly. Many businesses do want to be deaf friendly, but they just don't know how. So that was the intention behind the development of the company that I own, which is called Deaf Friendly, which is where deaf, blind, hard of hearing individuals can rate businesses and their experiences as to whether that's very comfortable and efficient or smooth, or whether there have been barriers and communication issues. So we have reviewers that give the thumbs up or thumbs down for various businesses. And the purpose is to really educate those businesses, who are for the most part hearing businesses, how to serve deaf and hard of hearing customers. And again, the 4 things that I mentioned before, this technology hits the mark on all 4. This is our website. If you want to take a look at that platform now, you can see a picture of it on the slide. And on the right side of the screen, you can see 4 different businesses and the reviews that they got. Most of them got 4 or 5 stars. The first one is Rachel's Ginger Beer, which is a company on Capitol Hill. They got a 4-star review. Starbucks, Stoop Brewing Company, and Bike Works. Deaf people, not right now, but when the world is healthy, deaf people are out and going in and out of businesses on a daily basis. So we're encouraging people to give these reviews and give feedback to the businesses on how they're performing. You may be familiar with a platform that's called Yelp, and so this is a very similar platform, but it's specific to the deaf community. I might be a bit biased, but I think this is a great piece of technology. It was developed by deaf people for deaf people, and the intention of it is to educate the whole community about our needs, and those that are involved in leading and really contributing and profiting from the technology are deaf people. So we've kind of hit all the marks there. So as you go into a business, you might have a good experience. And if you do, then you become a repeat customer, right? So Deaf Friendly is here to encourage that, as we educate businesses on how to improve their services to the community, then they'll have more community members coming to them for their business. I did want to talk a little bit about some of the positive technologies that have impacted the deaf community. I don't have a slide specific to that. Duh, I guess I should, but sorry. I'll just go ahead and share some of those. First, from a shopper's perspective, a deaf consumer, there are many positive technologies out there. And I think some you may have encountered recently. It has to do with hotels. A big issue for deaf people who go to hotels and stay in hotels are, you check in, you go to the front desk, and then you go to your room and you want to order room service, and you are not able to use the phone that's in the room. And a lot of deaf people, when they check in, you know, they'll get up to the room and they'll be stuck. There's no way to contact the front desk to access information. You know, so, or to see the gym club or whatever. So now more and more hotels are providing in-room text solutions. So if I go up to my my room door, I don't have to actually communicate with the desk. I can text them in order to communicate rather than having to call, or, you know, that's a great service for all travelers, not just deaf and hard of hearing travelers, but it's a big benefit. Another technology right now, particularly around the time of COVID-19, you know, this has impacted the whole global community, and we're all experiencing barriers in utilizing masks. Those are a particular barrier for deaf and hard of hearing individuals who rely on the visual facial expression in order to get information. Masks are a total barrier. You know, imagine me giving my presentation with half of my face unavailable. So those types of masks, although they're necessary now, are becoming are a big barrier. So more and more masks are being available that have a clear panel in the front. So deaf individuals are able to access more facial grammar and facial information. So there's two companies that are providing those currently. One is a deaf-owned business, which is way cool. So that's another one. I think speech recognition technologies, SRT, speech recognition technologies, or AI, artificial intelligence. Those technologies are able to capture auditory speech and then caption that. And I think that now that the world is all, you know, it's become an advantage for all of us working remotely, particularly, you know, using Zoom, Microsoft Teams. A lot of those platforms and meetings are now connecting with speech recognition technologies to provide the written transcript for those of us that are really appreciate utilizing English. So people that prefer American Sign Language as their primary language may not feel it's a benefit, but those of us who are utilizing English appreciate those technologies, and so we want to recognize that. You may have seen more and more chat bots. If you're online, you might be on a website and a little box will pop up with someone there who's saying, can I help you? So you can communicate with someone right away. It's a very efficient way to get information rather than trying to call through a video relay service or try to connect through the website in other ways. It's just a instant communication. So there are technologies out there that are providing positive experiences. But again, it's not one size fits all. Deaf and hard of hearing individuals are on a whole spectrum on our preferences for communication and our communication needs. There's, again, no one size fits all for any of these technologies. So we all need to be creative and adaptable. So, okay, moving on. This slide just shows how you can contact me or connect with me. And We'll also have time during question and answer, but if you do at some point want to contact me, there's this, the information is here on the slide. So I look forward to chatting with you more during Q&A.
Jesse here. Thank you so much, Echo. So now our next panelist is Raja Kushamahala, and he will be talking about the topic of research and deaf culture. And how can hearing researchers support the deaf community as well as involve deaf people in the research process itself? So I look forward to this topic. I think it's a really important one. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Raja Kushanalagar, and I am the Director of Informational Technology Program at Gallaudet University. I'm going to show you my slides, so hold on just a moment. I'll get them for you. Okay, I think we're ready to proceed now. Okay. As I said before, I'm the Director of Informational Technology Programs at Gallaudet University. Not only for University Deaf Hard, it is the only deaf and hard of hearing university in the world. Deaf and hard of hearing individuals are everywhere. Even though we are a small percentage, we're about 2% of the people are hard of hearing and 0.5% of the individuals are deaf. Of course, there are many senior citizens who are late deafened who are not included in the statistic, and that increases it to about 10% of the population. There are also many individuals who need help hearing a specific smaller location. What we notice is that it's a very small percentage that's widespread. And there's are some devices that are designed for deaf individuals to use. But oftentimes they're not included in the discussion of how to design these devices. First of all, the key thing is that deaf and hard of hearing individuals are very diverse. And how we communicate is diverse. There's not just one standardized way that all deaf and hard of hearing people chat. And we need to adapt to each one of those methodologies, which means that this technology has to be flexible. And we don't soon understand that it has to be adaptable to a variety of people's needs. I also want to talk a little bit about the study and evaluation that I did of the technological use at various universities. I did some surveys and I asked people, about 20 deaf and hard of hearing students, about their experiences of employment. And this slide asked them, when do they use speech at their place of employment? Do they use it or not? Do people understand their speech, for sake of example? And where do they think they fall on a continuum of understanding? Very few people said, I don't use my speech. Some people say I don't speak very clearly, but the majority of people fell somewhere in the middle, which means that nobody's speech is perfect and there is some struggle along a wide variety of ranges. There are other people who prefer other ways of communicate, such as reading and writing down on paper and so forth, and that's portrayed on this next slide coming up. This slide that you see in front of you shows that there's more than one answer, And the numbers you see show how many different people choose to communicate in different ways, and it rather is self-explanatory. Yes. If you notice, there's a lot of different ways that people communicate. It depends upon their location, how they speak. There's such things as speaking, writing, texting, email. Other individuals prefer to use apps, and they'll use a variety of apps, you know, phone apps, signing apps. They'll use video phones. But that interactive communication is not always going to be perfect. For sake of example, especially now with the virus, everybody's using the internet. And this survey was done when I had a chance to talk to people one-on-one, and they had the chance to interface with others on a one-on-one basis. The next slide here is showing the answers to my question when I asked people the concerns about communication that they had at work and the technology that they used. So I'll go ahead and give you a minute to read through the answers to those. Thank you. So if you notice, there are several different people who said they're concerned about the language they use. You know, because oftentimes with deaf folks, their first language is sign language, and they don't have full access to the spoken English as a native tongue. So when they do use paper and pen to write things, oftentimes they're concerned that they're not understood. But in addition to that, there are misunderstandings because of speech not being clear, and they're oftentimes self-depreciating, or other people look down upon them for the lack of clarity in their speech. Some people get along fine. Other people prefer to use a variety of creative thinking out of the box kind of things. So we need to look to accommodate a technology that provides access for everybody on their own terms. The design philosophies say that we need to maximize and improve communication by using a wide variety of means, whether it be captioning, interpreters, or visual communication. It's not only based on auditory and using residual hearing. It's based on a myriad of perspectives based on individual choice, and we need to respect all of those choices. Captioning is one way, which you'll notice here on the slide. About 100 years ago, we had movies without any sound attached to them. The technology had not yet been developed to prevent what was called soundies. We would refer to those movies now as silent films. And at that time, deaf people had an equal playing field as hearing folks, because all of the information came across in the same manner, in the same fashion. All news was conveyed that way. People would go to the theater on the weekend to see these little newsreels, which were all accessible to deaf folks. They would see a card come up on screen with words, and then it would go back to the motion picture action and back and forth between the words and the action. And it fit deaf people as well as hearing individuals on equal playing field. Well, as time developed, we lost access to this with the invention of sound, or what we call soundies, in 1927. Immediately, within approximately 2 years, all of the films became what was called talkies. So all the films that came out had a soundtrack, which meant that the deaf individuals, you know, for sake of example, there's a gentleman now who's the father who's at the University of Washington. He tells a story of losing access to movies. his father talked about losing access to movies, and he always dreamed about having films that would be accessible, where words could be thrown up onto the screen like before. But the technology had not yet been developed. Now, it stayed that way through the 50s, 60s, 70s. And now what we noticed is that when we have the technology, hearing people are resistant to using it. Fast forward to the 90s, 50 years later, and we are finally starting to have captioning on movies and TVs on a wide array of arenas. And we don't want to go back again. We don't want time to go back in reverse. As technology marches forward, we want deaf people involved in the development of a variety of technologies. So therefore, we have a foundation of principles in place where we are no longer segregated and out of the feedback loop. We want to be included in technological development. Now, moving on, I want to chat just a little bit about the similarities and the differences between auditory information and visual information. Let's talk about speaking for sake of example. Okay, information is spread out there. Wherever one may look, it can still be picked up auditorially. That said, the farther the distance is, the louder the volume has to be for the ear to hear the communication. Also, there's a lot more communication that is, how do I say, identifiable, other than rather spoken speech. Now let's compare that to using captions. When we use captions, our eyes have to be glued to the exact words in front of us. And the farther away we are, the words are still there, but how we see it might be affected. Now, the difference between caption and spoken words and how information is taken into the brain is best illuminated by a push-pull analogy. The captions, the hearing pulls, but the captions push. So as you are reading along, you have to take in the information as it's coming to you. And that is one important part that's missing with the human connection, is the human connection. Let me tell you a little bit more about that specifically. Here what we have is eye tracking. This is the sign I'm using for tracking. When we are tracking with the eyeball, we have to look at where the person is, but we also have the flexibility to look around that individual, right? However, when you compare that to captioning, the person has to follow the words as they flash across the screen, which means once you are interrupted from that vision or look away from your object, the whole process is interrupted and put into this state of disruption. So with this eye gaze that we're talking about, listening is more passive, where watching and taking in information with your eyes is more assertive or active. This shows the different kinds of communication and how we get it. And we compare the captioning to sign language interpreters. All right, when we're reading, our eyes have to stay on the words. But when we're signing, we have the ability to take in information in a form that's more linguistically palatable. Just like hearing people take in spoken language, they can hear word by word. And sign language can come in sign by sign. Let me illuminate that a little bit more by the next slide I have. Okay, what you will notice is that with eye tracking, there is more attention given to where the person wants to gain information through the eyes themselves. That way they're able to get more information from the facial grammar, the signs, and other visual information. Both captioning and the information through captioning and the information through interpreting are both crucial components to communication. And so the highest form of acquiring the knowledge is by utilizing both of those technologies. Now, moving along, I'd like to chat a little bit more about technological design and how to consider this type of information conveyance in devices. It's important that we have the user's experience being taken into consideration, because it is not the same between hearing information, seeing information, and reading information. All three of these modalities have their own distinct and unique functions. And you really have to walk in someone's shoes to understand the unique differences between these three modalities. With that in mind, please don't assume anything. Make sure that people who are deaf or hard of hearing or late deaf and senior citizen or even hearing individuals are accommodated in the appropriate way through the use of universal design. Also, make sure that the consumers are satisfied and accepting of the technology put forth. It has to be both used visually as well as in a social environment. Policies, for sake of example, and lobbying efforts have to fight on behalf of and sign language interpreters and captioning, especially during emergency situations. And nothing is going to be a permanent solution. We have to have policies that are based on mutual acceptance and collaboration and willingness to work together for the betterment of all. I really want to emphasize this next point, that it's crucial to involve deaf and hard of hearing individuals in the advent of any new technology as users, because people who do not walk within our shoes cannot possibly understand the experiences that we've gone through. At the same time, we need to fight for inclusion by corporations and businesses. Also, we need to try to make technological design universal, not necessarily for specialized purposes only. Let me give you an example. There's some good and bad things out there. On the left, you see something good. That's universal design. That's the use of everyday, automatic, instantaneous innovation. Okay, and that is quite popular with deaf folks. You know, calling to make a telephone call, for sake of example, through the use of a video phone. If I'm going to make a call, say, or I'm watching a movie, I might have automatic captioning come on when I watch that film. Because it's not only for Android users, but it's also for iPhone users as well. There's another benefit to think about, and that is alarm systems and lights flashing to signify sounds. Why can't we have both a sound alert as well as a visual alert? That way it universally meets all people's needs. Now, on the other side of this slide is things not to do. Okay? People who don't include deaf and hard of hearing people in this research, for sake of example. Okay? Don't attach electrodes to our arms. Don't ever do that. Okay? It's not possible to have an everyday existence if you have stuff attached to our limbs. Say about 40 or 50 years ago, there was a famous scientist, Norrit Water, who thought that how do I say, that we have a feeling of noise which is acquired through hands. And the high frequencies would tickle your thumb, and the lower frequencies would tickle your pinky. And we could actually feel these vibrations. And it was tried for about 10 years to have deaf children as well as some adults try out this new technology. It was a renowned failure, and people did not understand why. That's because they didn't talk to deaf or hard of hearing people first. We were never involved in those discussions with the advent of the technology. Sometimes these crazy ideas are assigned to only one group of people. Like at California State University, they had communication through the tongue. That's right, the tongue. And information was supposed to be acquired through the mouth in that respect. There was Morse code being done, A through Z, through the tongue. And they never even asked deaf people to be involved in that. That idea was dropped like a hot potato. I mean, can you imagine walking through your life and everyday life with things coming in and tickling your tongue? Anyway. So back to the point here is that we need to work together. Deaf folks and hearing folks need to come together. First of all, it's important to do this. It's important for both of us. In the engineering and development of these tools, there has to be diversity included. We cannot assume that there's only one best solution and focus on a narrow, broad band of individuals and ignore others on the continuum. For sake of example, captionings today, they are used by 80% of individuals who, 80% of the users are hearing people. Perhaps English is their second language and they like to read the captioning, or perhaps children are improving their English usage by watching captioning. Or there's televisions on in a noisy public place. People rely on the captioning because they can't hear the spoken soundtrack. So there's a variety of ways in which accessible, or rather technology, can be accessible by all because of a thought given to universal design. Now, here are some questions. Research was done with hearing people and deaf people working together, getting both perspectives in the research team in order to solve these technological problems for everybody. Okay?
All right, thank you so much, Raja. We really appreciate your time and joining us today and sharing your research and what we have learned from inclusion of deaf people in research. So now we are going to start the Q&A portion of our session. So for people who have just joined us, my name is Jessie, and my pronouns are she, her. I graduated from the University of Washington in 2017 with infometrics. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask through our Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. If you would prefer to sign or speak your question, please notify us through that same box and let us know that you would like to do it that way. Christine, who is monitoring the call, she will grant you permission to turn your camera on or to unmute your mic. Okay, so the first question for all our panelists is, what are some of the misconceptions or assumptions about the deaf community's needs for technology that you've seen? What do deaf people want or need?
Katie, hold on. So this is Katie here, just checking in. Yep, this is Katie. I would like to answer that question. There are many misconceptions that happen, I think, that are related to that concept of that everybody can speak or everybody can hear to some degree, right? And I just want to say that that is not the case. And that happens so frequently. Sorry, background noise. There's so much in language. It's what you see, what you feel, what you sense. And my perception and my reality may not be the same as the perception or reality of any other deaf person. We are all individuals. It's not the same for all.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Echo here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about some misconceptions. I think that I'm continuously, you know, having to ask people, you know, what is this for? A lot of hearing people think that we need to have access to the whole thing. Like, for example, a microwave. Do I absolutely need to hear it beeping? No, not necessarily. I don't really care about some of those things. So there are things that are not important to me because I have developed ways of getting the information I need through my eyes. And, you know, for me, if something's in the microwave, I just have set an alarm in my brain. I can tell when there's about 1 minute has passed. So it's not like everything has to be, the assumption is that every sound has to be accessible at all times, and that's not necessarily true. Another misconception is that one size does fit all. And as I mentioned during my part of the talk or presentation, is that, you know, there's a real continuum of people. Some deaf people are very fluent in American Sign Language, some people don't sign at all, and there's a people in between. So when you're designing a product for, quote, deaf people, it's really important that you find out who it is that's going to actually benefit from this product. Is it people who use sign language? Is it hard of hearing people who may or may not sign? So, you know, you have to really go through all the various layers of looking at who your audience really is, and don't assume that one size fits all. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Echo. Raja, would you like to respond? You don't have to. All right, our next question. How can teachers expand their curriculum to ensure that students are learning not just the technical skills, but how to understand their users and how that their projects might impact various communities like the deaf community?
I'll just put this out there, just a quick answer. I think it's very important to include people with a variety of experiences. Be inclusive, invite deaf and hard of hearing people into the classroom to give a presentation for an hour about a whole wide variety of topics. And also make sure that the students are out there and interacting with a wide variety of people of whatever difference that might be, whether it be racial, economic, whatever type of community that they are able to have an authentic understanding by actually interacting with the people that they're trying to serve or develop tools for.
I believe that Raja has a response to the first question posed, but he was having problems with his video. And so, Raja, you have the chance now to answer either question.
Sure. The question was related to ways for hearing individuals who include students to better design and come up with technology for the deaf community. Okay, well, first of all, the deaf, are not high in number. So really we need to find a way to connect to the universities and industry. And that way would be through the internet. They can't just take off doing things by themselves. We need to think of each other by being actively connected and interfacing to industry, the community, universities, and so forth. And it is easy to find individuals who are interested in working within those fields and giving their 2 cents. There are so many deaf individuals who are underemployed but can still work with this. And we can now be included and make this all a better world by listening to their perspectives.
We want to include those people in what we do going forward.
And we want to include those people going forward.
Thank you, Raja. So we're running a little short on time, and so I'd like to go to the next question. What are some barriers to deaf people to get involved in staying in tech? And how can hearing people support them?
Barriers. Technology. What we've noticed is within the education situation is that it's proceeding to read captioning and follow the interpreters is easier and better than missing information. For sake of example, we have math. 1 + 1 = 2. 2 + 2 = 4. But if the student looks away at the interpreter, then back to the board, they've actually missed any other further explanation. So what we need to do is have more support to the deaf and hard of hearing by giving them more time to follow what's happening and more time in general to be able to catch up with the material and the technology that's being used. In addition to that, today, with today's technology and the information available to us, we need to connect to it and keep up with it.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from our panelists? Okay, we do have some questions. Oh, Echo?
Oh, yes, I
to say
just want to respond. But could you repeat the question again, if you wouldn't mind?
Certainly. My question is, what are the barriers for deaf and hard of there are barriers for deaf and hard of hearing people in the tech industry. What are the barriers and how can hearing people support them?
Yeah, I was wrong. I didn't want to answer that question, so I'll pass. Sorry.
Okay, our next question comes from the audience.
Yep, I'm still here.
And what methods do you find effective for hearing people who are designing for deaf people?
Okay, from my experience, it's patience and acceptance of diversity and appreciation of different perspectives. Also, I'm thinking that there's got to be some cool new ways to communicate. I mean, not just email and text, so we don't have to get stuck in the same old rut. Let's think out of the box, you know, for all of us into the future.
Thank you. So our next question is for the participants in participatory design and research. What kind of adjustments need to be made? What do you think about participatory design and what decisions have been made for that?
Okay, I have been involved in participatory design previously. The best experience is when, at the very beginning, from the get-go, even before setting up the brainstorming sessions, we have a group meeting of brainstorming to guide the way of where we're going to go before the problems have actually been addressed yet or designs have been proposed. We don't want to get stuck in some endless feedback loop. We want to think about the long haul from the very first day. I mean, it's nice to get involved in these things 2 or 3 times as we go, not just one time feedback and we're done.
One question is that people are asking to share tips or resources to recruit deaf and hard of hearing people and individuals for projects. Anyone for that one?
Well, often the best way is to connect with the community locally. Sometimes that might be starting in the university or going to disabled programs, or even ask a friend or of a deaf person to start networking within a community itself. Go to these social events. Really connect with your local community. Yeah, I guess that's the answer. Because often what we'll find is that deaf individuals are there who are within the community that are eager to help. And they will lead you to other people.
All right, thank you. There is another question from the audience, from Kelly, who has her hand raised. Kelly, would you like to sign your question?
This is Raja. You don't you're not talking to me on this one, are you? About, because I see a question about growing up hearing. I'm sorry, growing up deaf and hearing class. Because that answer for me, I remember hanging out with an interpreter, being with an interpreter, but needing to be assertive when I socialize with people in the environment. You know, and it really took time to learn how to become social for me. And sometimes people, you know, they can just not really have the patience to chat with deaf people and not take the time, you know, and you just can't find a way around it, you know, and fighting against the unintended oppression requires a lot of positive thinking.
This is Katie. Can I respond to this? May I actually, hold on, I just want to make sure the interpreter is online. Can people hear the interpreter? Yes? Hold on. Hold on.
Yes.
Just checking in now. Yes. So as far as hearing aids go, et cetera, and using the technology, et cetera, it's a headache and it's very frustrating for people. It is not an easy thing to do. So this is something that actually did happen to me. This is not just an isolated incident. This is something. So what I want to say to people is like, you know, get rid of the hearing aids. Get rid of the, I took my hearing aids off and it was helpful for me. But that's just one example of the technology that has been forced upon us, unhelpful for us as deaf people, when there are other ways. So I just want to put that there as a personal story.
All right, thank you for sharing your experience. I think it's really important to consider the experiences that deaf people to take deaf studies class, that there are peers that can learn sign language, that can become signing peers to deaf students. So we're getting near the end, and so I would like to bring forward the panelists if they would like to share any closing comments before we end today.
Yes, I would like to share just a brief phrase, and that is that technology is fantastic in so many ways. It's wonderful, and one thing that we should never do, in my opinion, is we can never replace that human connection with technology. So captionings are wonderful if somebody's using that as speech recognition. Text communication is cool, but as a deaf person, we are starved for human connection, and that's so critical. So something to think about. It's not a replacement for the human connection.
Thank you. Raja, would you like to say something?
Well, really the same. It's all about human connection. That's the key. Really, it's the, you know, humans are social animals. So, yeah, there you go. Oh, and just the closing words is that don't wait 50 years to have the next, how do I say, interaction with people again, you know, like we did with the movies, start now and be involved with people from the beginning all the way to the end when it comes to the research and technology.
Thank you. Katie, would you like to add something?
Unmute. Nope, here we go. So just thinking about technology, hearing aids, cochlear implants, et cetera, and I really get it, but I really want people to understand. The point is, we have to work together. You cannot just go take an ASL class, you know, and that equivocates to, you know, somebody else getting a cochlear implant. You have to connect with the deaf community. You have to connect with them, period. So hearing people need to initiate and build that bridge and create the tools that we need to communicate with each other. That's how we're going to get along. We have to build that bridge, and it has to go both ways, and that's the only way it's going to be effective. So whatever project you have in mind, whatever it is, you have to look at those two factors that, you know, and you have to prioritize the deaf people and deaf community. You have to do that and not look as deaf people are less than or whatever. We are the same as. You have to have that. You have to come from that perspective. You have to meet us and socialize with us from that same perspective, that we are all coming from the same place and that we are all equal too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. So Raja, thank you again too, and Echo. I want to thank everyone. Now I would like to hand it off to Christine for our closing comments. Thank you to Christine and for the Disability Commission for helping us to host this event. Thank you to our panelists, for all the interpreters, and for everyone who participated in today's event. Thank you for coming. Christine?
Hello, yes. Thank you so much, Jessie, for all of your help. You did an amazing job. All the panelists were incredible. Thank you. I personally learned so much, and I'm so excited that we got to do this. If you've been wondering about your question, if it got answered, if it didn't, it looks like all of the questions got answered. They might be typed answers. So if you look in the Q&A into answered, they should show up with some answers from our panelists. I'm going to leave this open for a little bit just in case you did want to comb through those questions and answers until everyone is gone. Thank you so much for attending. I really, really appreciate it. If you'd like to learn more about the panelists or just the SDC in general, please visit our website. I will type it into the chat so it's available. But if you just Google ASUW Student Disability Commission, it'll come up too. You should have a survey open in your browser once you leave this webinar. If you have any feedback for us, if anything was inaccessible to you, please let us know. Awesome. Thank you so much.